Hello there, and welcome to the Basic Survivor's Guide for the planet Gleba, or Gleba, or however you want to pronounce this thing. In this video, I'm going to summarize everything you need to know to get yourself acquainted with that thing and get yourself a factory running here. I'll keep it as low as possible on the spoiler side, so basically you can hop off this video whenever you feel like exploring for yourself further on. I will introduce in the first half of the video how to get yourself acquainted here. In the second half, or 2/3 of the video, depending on how it goes, I will introduce the basic factory design that, well, gives you the basic understanding of how things work here. And once you have that under control, it is more tedious to build on Gleba than on other planets, but it is honestly worth the effort. So, first of all, before I explain anything about this weird, wacky planet around you, you will face the fact that everything rots on this planet. Everything that you harvest will eventually turn into spoilage, which is something that you need to get rid of. Spoilage is a very low quality fuel, and yeah, it is everywhere. Whatever you pluck, which is not already spoilage, or with a few exceptions, will turn into muck. You can harvest a lot of fuel on this planet just by roaming around. Generally, Gleba is a very, very foraging friendly planet. Much of the early game is just running around and gathering stuff. Therefore, the only thing that I think is really recommendable on this planet is a couple of construction drones. I've started out my Gleba run really only with that, no other provisions, and I enjoyed it. But I wouldn't want to start without the drones, because, you see, you might be able to right-click all of this stuff and just pick it up, yes. But in all honesty, a swarm of construction robots, Alt-D for the construction planner, and it does that. So, you see, it is a much different thing. Highly recommended. But everything else is handy, but not really necessary. So, we're now acquainted with the basics. There is nothing you can mine here except for rock. And I strongly recommend you to do so as quick as you can. Basically, as soon as you can, set up a mining machine, get yourself as much rock as you can, because landfill is a thing here on this planet which is in high demand. And as you see here, landfill eats up tons of stone, so yeah, mine that stuff as quick as you can, because stone is a resource that you will not really harvest too much here in its own natural environment. The next thing that you should look for are these gray and copper-colored blobs here, stromatolites. These are your early and, yeah, pretty much early game source of minerals. They yield a raw form of ore, and they also yield bacteria, which transform after a minute into more ore. This is going to be interesting later, but for now, this is going to be your source of ore and stone to some degree. Therefore, just pluck them. You don't need to worry about about wasting anything. These are specifically meant to get you kick-started on Gleba. Later you won't need them because copper and iron are limitless on this planet. It's really all down to agriculture. This is the other color of these copper stromatolites. And with that combination, it'll be very easy to set yourself up a couple of stone furnaces and start smelting already. And with that smelting, you can get yourself some burner miner drills going, and I can't stress it out enough how much stone you will need on this planet early on. Therefore, get this party started as quick as you can. After that, your next trip will be to these bright green and bright purple areas. The bright green area is Yumeko territory, and the other one is Jelly Nut. The Yumeko is going to be the plant that we will eventually extract copper out of and many other useful things, but for the very first time, you're looking for this. You see them also as very bright spots here on the map. What's important to note is that these very bright areas here, the large flecks here, this is what you're looking for. The ultra bright ones, not the white ones, but the brighter ones, are areas where we can later farm, but more about that in a hot minute. The very first thing that you do is you pick up those Yumeko, then you peel them in your inventory, which yields you Yumeko mash and Yumeko seeds, and that Yumeko mash can then be turned, if you wanted to, into copper bacteria. So that's something that you could do while you're handcrafting. We're going to do much more with these materials later, but for starters, we really don't need much more for that. It'll unlock tech though that you will require. So remind yourself where you have this farming area, and then head on over to the purple area and do the same thing there with the jelly nuts. The jelly nuts are your iron source in the future, and they can be therefore also transformed into iron bacteria. But I'm not going to showcase that now because it's basically the same that you saw on the Yumeko. It is just here that you have this bright purple. This is where you can farm, or where you can set up farm plots, and that super bright purple here, that stuff is where you could already farm from the get-go, and the white stuff is the jelly nut, obviously. So once you have unlocked these techs by processing these plants in your pocket, you will have the ability to create nutrients. Nutrients are only used for feeding your biochamber, which you should be able to craft now, if I'm not mistaken. The biochamber will require a couple of things which you're already acquainted with. Nutrients are now no problem to create. We can make them out of rot, but there is a pentapod egg included. So the pentapod egg can be multiplied. So for your first biochamber that you're building, I highly recommend to plan ahead, because when you have built your first biochamber, you can then take your materials and create out of that pentapod egg, if you have another one, more pentapod eggs. But it's totally fine to sit on one biochamber right from the get-go. Don't stress yourself out. One biochamber from your first egg that you will wrestle from these creatures. So once you have your first clips there produced, some yellow magazines are all it takes, you can then go there, shoot the creatures, grab the egg, craft yourself your first biochamber. But since everything in this planet rots, prepare yourself so you have the materials right ahead, right away. And with that biochamber, then you have the ability to process items in a completely new way. So we got here pretty much not all the materials that we need, but I'm going to swap on over now to the more advanced save file of mine, because you don't need to see how you go for that. You can just shoot that little bugger there and then craft it. By now you should know how to craft something, I assume. Now, so let's get on over to the actual factory that I've built here. So ignore this for a second, and let me introduce to you the biochamber. We're going to go over that in a hot minute. The biochamber allows you to do all manner of different things, but first of all, it allows you also to duplicate pentapod eggs. So your next goal after having built your first biochamber will be to prepare yourself to craft a boatload of pentapod eggs, but you have to have the materials also to craft them directly into a load of biochambers. You will need for your first starting setup something like 10 to 15 biochambers. I don't know, it depends on how high you want to scale. I think you could go as low as 7, but I would recommend 10 so you are on the safe side. Prepare these and then move over to preparing agricultural towers. This is going to be your next big quest. The agricultural towers will provide for you new plants. You will have the seeds for these plants by processing these plants. That means for agriculture, you have to craft first one of these towers, then you move on over to the territory, harvest the plants, process the plants, and then collect a couple of those seeds. Once this process is running, once your farms are running, they will reproduce seeds, but for the very first time you will need to prepare yourself something like 3 to 5 seeds. That's that. And then you move on over to these territories. As you can see, here we have area that looks like this. This is territory which can be filled with regular landfill. And when we move closer to this area here, somewhere around here, sec. We can't use this anymore. As you see here, some areas are not regularly landfillable, and some areas, it's hard to discern, have this purple area, which you could also fill with regular landfill, but here comes the next material into play, artificial Yumeko soil and artificial jelly nut soil. These are made out of landfill, nutrients, and seeds. You will require a few of these because then you will have the ability to place down this ground, as you see here. Here not, and here you can. Basically, all of the bright purple area accepts this artificial soil, and once you have an agricultural tower, you see, it segments it into such fields, and then when you use the artificial soil, the game helps you out in marking these, and then you can just set up a new patch of artificial soil there, and once a 3-on-3 grid is filled, the agricultural tower will set up new trees there and harvest them automatically. You just need to feed the tower with seeds, and it'll do the work all by itself. What it requires, though, is the fitting artificial soil to work with. You can also skip the artificial soil pod and set up your farms in these super bright spots. Alternatively, if that's more your fancy. The jelly nut works like this, and the Yumeko is basically the same. Just here, you can put the artificial soil on these areas, which are colored like that, and this area here is where you can actually go for your agriculture without preparing the artificial soil. Preparing the artificial soil takes some time, and as you see here, these belts, they are all made with landfill. This is all landfill. This entire strip is all landfill. Thousands of units of rock just to get this built over here. Because the swampy area here, you can't build there. So this is one of the challenges up to agriculture. But once you have wrestled all these, it's really only about getting the seeds back to the plant and getting the stuff back to where you want to process it. Here's one interesting caveat. The products, before they are processed, the jelly nuts and the Yumeko, last an entire hour on your belt. Their products have only a shelf time of a few low minutes. So it's no problem to have a long belt running from your farm to your base because it has an hour of time before it is going bad. Another important thing about farming, this produces spores. Spores are basically what is getting yourself into trouble on Gleba. Here, only the fact that I'm playing on peaceful mode is saving me from the locals from attacking me. When you start farming, you start attracting enemies, but only that starts the hostility cycle of the enemy. So when you want to start farming, you need to have defenses already prepared. Either you bring them up from outer planetary sources, or you manufacture them locally. These stromatolites that are lying around everywhere are making it relatively easy to tinker out a big bad forge, because you also have plenty of supply of spoilage, wood that you can use to make some semi-automated smelting going on. Whatever you do, the moment you start agriculturing, you start to evolve the enemies and make them hostile towards you. Before that, you have pretty much all the time in the world, as far as I've understood the mechanics of this planet, at least. So, now you know how to make Yumeko and Jelly Nut, but what the hell are you supposed to do with that? This is probably the most challenging part, because from this point on, we're going to talk about the factory, how it will work. I'm going to explain it first, theoretically, and then I'm going to walk you through this little nightmare here and show it how I strung it up. And I hope by the end of this video you understand how it all works. So, first of all, let's talk about what we make out of these plants. Yumeko processing turns it into Yumeko mash. Jelly nut processing turns it into jelly. Here's the interesting thing. Once you mix these two plants together, where's the recipe? Come on. I'm blind right here. Let's take a bio chamber and do it there. The recipe here, we need Bioflux there. Once you put Yumeko mash and jelly together, they transform into Bioflux. Bioflux is on itself 2 hours shelf time, but it can't be burned. This is one thing that you should keep in mind. But Bioflux now is one material that you can do so many things with. Bioflux, first of all, provides you a good and reliable source of nutrients. Before you can craft Bioflux, make your nutrients preferably out of your Mako mash, but it's just, this is the ultimate production for nutrients. Bioflux is also needed for various other products. You can make with this stuff now rocket fuel, plastic, sulfur. These items, all the stuff that you need to get yourself off planet, but also with Bioflux, we can make bacteria grow. So we take one bacteria and turn it into 4 bacteria with a net plus of 3. So Bioflux is what really kicks your plants into motion. The only problem is that you need, for a steady production of biochambers, a steady production of pentapod eggs. Pentapod eggs are pretty nifty, except for the fact that they do spoil like everything here on the planet, and they turn into monsters if they spoil. No, they don't turn into spoilage, they hatch, you see. So, your first cycle will be rolling around, processing Umeko, processing jelly nut, making out of these two things Bioflux, making out of that Bioflux nutrients. And if you want to have a steady flow of things, you can then make with these ingredients pentapod eggs. And these pentapod eggs go at the end of the road into the green science packs. And together with Bioflux, we make local science, which also rots in an hour. So, alright, this is the basic cycle. Sounds terribly complicated, but in action, it is neat and simple. So I'm going to introduce that now, and let's talk about that. So you see, here goes the Umeko in. My Umeko rolls here to the center of this. Here, the Umeko gets processed. The machine here looks terribly complicated, but it's actually not. At this belt where the Umeko goes in, I have one inserter, which is filtering out spoilage. I have here the inserter picking up the Umeko. I have one inserter outputting the Umeko seed. I have another output inserter taking spoilage out of the machine, because spoilage does not only happen on the belt, it also happens on the machine. And last but not least, finally, an inserter that extracts the Umeko mash. The first thing that you should notice is that almost every inserter which takes something out of the machine has some sort of filter, and it's just necessary. The machine takes its nutrients from up here, but more about that in a hot second. I have mirrored the same thing for the jelly nuts. The setup is the same. The machine needs to have an extractor for the seeds, it needs an extractor for the jelly, and it needs an extractor for the spoilage. This is absolutely necessary and leads to quite some spaghetti-o fun. The rule of thumb here is everything on Gleba needs a way to get rid of spoilage, and you get rid of spoilage by burning it, but more about that in a second. So, these items now roll over to the Bioflux chamber, where they get transformed into Bioflux. Here, the same rules apply. You have one inserter that extracts the spoilage. Here I take a detour by putting the spoilage for a moment into the chest here, before I put it there, and then we take here the Bioflux and finally transform it into nutrients. And this is basically your fuel line. This now rolls through my entire little factory here, as you can see, and supports all of the biochambers with fuel, before at the end of the line, 2 big fat inserters grab everything out, and now we're talking about spoilage. So this is the basic circle, by the way. Once you have this, you are basically set for a while. Spoilage now goes into heating towers. Heating towers are the optimal friends to destroy that stuff. 2 reasons for that. For one, they provide a nice supply of power, more about that later, but their big advantage is, doesn't it stop burning when at maximum temperature? This means these things will forever accept your trash, and that's what they're meant to be good for. So that is why I have an extensive network for trash. So besides this entire facility, whatever I do, anywhere, every belt extracts its trash onto the trash belt, every machine extracts its trash onto the trash belt, and you need those filters. This is what makes Gleba work. If you extract pollution spoilage out of all your machines like that and pipe it into these bad boys here, you'll never ever have any problems with backing up machines. The problem is just to make it reliable. Alright, but now let's finish up the basic cycle. The Bioflux that I have now goes here into this machine. And I have set up a pentapod replicator. So this is quite important to note. The pentapod replicator here only requires water, nutrients, and pentapod eggs. The nutrients it takes here out of the cycle via a splitter. So you see, it's a pretty nifty little thing. But here goes. The cycle here produces always 2 pentapod eggs out of 1 pentapod egg. The biochambers have a built-in productivity bonus, so every second cycle will produce 3 eggs instead of 2 eggs. What I do here is very simple. I have one machine outputting the egg onto the belt, the other guy here grabbing immediately the next egg there. I did an override of the stack size because I only wanted to pick up 1 egg. We don't need more of that. So these eggs now go down this spaghetti-o to this lab facility where they get defused. What I do here is quite simple. As long as you have a facility that eats more eggs than you produce, here you see we produce 0.33 eggs per second, and here we eat 0.5 eggs per second. Situation defuse. This is what you require to make it work. And here I use the science packs for diffusing sake. Here again, same setup. Extraction of spoilage out of the machine, extraction of spoilage out of the finished product, because even the science spoils, yada yada yada. But this is one way. The other way is to put the eggs on the end of their road into a heating tower and just burn them there. They're relatively high quality fuel. So yeah, now you know the basic cycle of how to produce things on Gleba. It is really about processing this stuff, that stuff, transforming it into bioflux, transforming the bioflux back into nutrients, and then feeding that stuff back into the whole machine. The caveat is that every belt needs a spoilage remover, and every machine needs a spoilage remover. You basically need an entire belt network that just manages spoilage and pipes it back into these heating towers. So before I go into the metal production thing, quick word about those heating towers. They not only produce a ways and means for us to get rid of the spoilage. As you see here, they also produce temperature. And a heat exchanger transforms temperature into steam. You can easily host these big fat steam turbines as power producers just as a side product. You will never run out of spoilage, because on Gleba, things will always stay in motion. Otherwise, they'll clog up, so you can rely on this source of power. Heating towers are really awesome and give you, when your factory starts growing, a really nice power footprint to work with. But you shouldn't rely on these on themselves, it's just a nice side product. So, next thing, metal production. So, let's move outside of the factory to explain it real quick and then show it in action again. So the recipe goes like this. We can kickstart an iron bacteria with jelly. It'll produce spoilage and has a chance to produce a bacteria. Then we can take that bacteria and multiply it with Bioflux. This is the basic setup and the basic thing. So as soon as you have Bioflux, that means it's easy, because once you have Bioflux, you also have jelly, and you'll also have Umeko, so you can make these both. So, works like this. This is the simplest setup that I've found so far. I have here one biochamber providing jelly. Clearly, same setup here. Seed extractor, spoilage extractor, you know the drill. Jelly goes in to that machine where spoilage gets created, of course, and sometimes a bacteria. Bacteria goes into this machine where we get more bacteria. The more bacteria gets now transferred onto this small belt where the bacteria gets transferred into the chest. This chest here is where we let the bacteria mature. As you see here, once they rot, they turn into iron ore. This inserter here is filtered to take bacteria back into the machine, so it'll do the multiplying thing. Here On both machines, I have not only the usual spoilage extractors, we also have iron ore extractors, because this thing has a double spoilage mechanic. It does not only create this regular spoilage, sometimes iron bacteria can rot inside the machine and clog it up, because the output slot then is locked. Therefore, I have here created an output thing here, an output thing there, and they both lead into the iron chest. So, here, the maturing chamber, let's call it like that, has one inserter which is allowed to pick up the iron ore out of the system, the finished iron ore, once it's finished ripening, and then it goes into your regular smelter setup. That's just what it is. The niftiness about this setup is that even if everything inside here will clog up and turn into iron ore, it's no problem. The moment your smelters start picking up iron ore again, eventually this machine will be empty again. It will start producing a bacteria. Eventually this machine will be empty again, except another bacteria. And you see, the whole process kickstarts itself without you having to do anything. The only downside, yes, you have a spoilage, you have a waste of jelly, because you basically produce for nothing. Once this setup here is backed up, you will have a backup here as well, but at the end of the day, you'll just burn it as spoilage. The thing is, iron and copper can be regrown endlessly in form of Umeko and jelly nut. There is no limit to these. The only limited resources on this planet are stone. It's that. Therefore, you don't need to worry about things just being moved around just to get burned at the end of the day. So, that's metal production. Let's go over the last parts, how to get back to space. So you can combine Bioflux, jelly and water to create rocket fuel. Gleba is so crazy. When it comes down to rocket fuel, you can't just crank out that stuff in crazy amounts. So getting back to space on that end is stupidly easy. All you need to do is fill some Bioflux in there and let it grab some jello, and you get rocket fuel for days. The other materials that you require, blue circuits and low-density structures, well, low-density structures are, at the moment, you have understood how to multiply your bacteria. By the way, the copper is exactly the same, just with Umeko. That's why I didn't introduce it. Once you have mastered this, you have copper and steel available. But plastic requires here a new recipe, form of bioplastic. It's Bioflux and Umeko. So you mix the other fruit to get plastic. So this yields you access to red, to the red circuits and everything else plastic related. Also low density structures, obviously, they require plastic too. And then last but not least, sulfuric acid. Here, this is maybe the most complicated part about Gleba. We need to make that via biosulfur. So you, at the end of the road, even use spoilage. So I have this all set up here already. One sulfur factory, one plastic factory. But it's all the same principle. You have to extract spoilage everywhere, and then it starts working like every other factory as well. What's really important to note is that once you have these materials all set up, you can then just get yourself a rocket silo going. Oh, I forgot, lube is made out of jelly, so you can make your electric engines like that. So, once you get back to space, you have Gleba conquered, and you can transport those green bottles back to your home planet. Or you make use of the fact that everything here is literally endless in terms of resource production, and get your science onto Gleba. Because I personally think that Gleba is probably the best planet right now to source your science on, because it can access all 3 planets just like Novice can, but you don't have to bumble around with the green science bottles. It's just my personal impression, but surely you can logistically transport these bad boys. It's not a problem. Once you have a steady logistics supply going, it's just like that. So, I hope this video helps you out understanding how to roll things on Gleba. I wanted to do 20 minutes. I didn't manage to. I can't make it shorter. I really hope that you have now a better understanding of the planet, feel less intimidated by it, because at the end of this trip, I love this planet. Gleba is really cool. Once you have mastered its quirkiness, you'll enjoy the easiness of resource abundance that this lush planet offers you. So, thanks for watching. Drop me your comments, questions, things you might want to add, good tips and tricks. I'm all ears. Leave a like, leave a subscribe. Consider checking out the description box. Feel free to support Icon Gaming financially if you feel so kind. I'd be very delighted. And obviously, many thanks to all of you supporting the channel. I really appreciate having you folks. And many thanks to you for watching this video. See you guys next time. Bye bye.